So today we want to continue the conversation about how to build a stronger support network, both within your institution, but also between institutions. So we want to talk a little about e-learning approaches. Then we want to talk about a design framework that we've been working on to try to organize all of these complex issues, give you some structure for the conversations that you're having internally. We'll talk a little bit about the ASU expansion story, how we use e-learning to grow our student base over the last 15 years. And then we'll have you do some work on your own design as you think about your operational next steps. So those are the objectives for the workshop. We're going to spend about 20 minutes on each one of those areas, with a little more time at the end for you to share with each other. We don't have a lot of people on the call, so we can probably do this as a committee of the whole. We might be able to do that, but we can also try some breakouts if we get more people participating. I want to start with a discussion about e-learning approaches, different ways that we use digital resources to enhance learning. What I wanted to do first is give you some context for the way we've been thinking about e-learning in the last several years at the University Design Institute. And the way we've devised discussion or schema for this is around these 4 E's: digital enrichment, enhancement, extension, and expansion. And I'll talk about each one in detail now. What really we want to let you know is that each of them has value in this process. Each of them is a critical piece of a digital strategy, but they are increasingly complex. So if you're thinking about fully online degree programs, that's digital expansion, you're going to be dealing with a lot more complexity in your organization. So let me jump in and talk about each of them in terms of those experiences. Digital enrichment is the first step in this long journey that we're all on. Many of you are using an LMS now. Hopefully by the end of this project, all of you will have a learning management system, and you're placing content, and your faculty members are placing content into the learning management system. That is an enrichment of the learning experience. It might be a YouTube video, it might be a video that the professor has made. Eventually, we are working on a content management system, and you'll be able to enrich the courses with content from that content management system. So thinking about the first step really is getting faculty comfortable with this. Some of the partner institutions are highly advanced and have thousands of courses online, and others are just getting started. So we want to encourage everybody to think of this as a first step in this journey. The second is enhancement, and that's really a transformational moment when the hybrid course blends online learning and active learning. In the case of Arizona State, we embraced this digital enhancement model for our first year courses so that we could improve our student success rate. And what we're trying to do with this is find the proper tool for the proper job. So if you're familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, we're focusing our online instructional resources on the lower level Blooms and spending more time in class on upper level Blooms, active learning and applied learning. So if you haven't used hybrid learning in the past, this could be a good way to enhance your student experience using digital resources. So think of this as the best of breed. We use the technology where appropriate, and we use the change in pedagogy where appropriate. The third one is digital extension. And what we mean by this is the ability to extend the classroom experience. Many of you, and during the pandemic, had to resort to Google Meet or Zoom or Microsoft Teams to extend your classroom. And some of you are still doing this. I know we've had conversations with USIU, and you're using this digital extension approach to offer degree programs online. So this is something that we are now much more familiar with within our faculty and staff development efforts. What we think of is a digital extension is a synchronous model. So that's when you're broadcasting your classroom experience out. And it has a benefit for students who can't travel or are sick, have contracted COVID or have other problems and can't get to the classroom. This is also referred to as high flex. You'll hear that term a lot. So digital extension is a synchronized broadcast approach. And the last one is digital expansion. This is what ASU embraced in 2009. And our model is a fully online degree program where students never come to campus. It is also asynchronous so that the students don't have to be at the same place at the same time. Now, digital expansion is really the last step in this journey from enrichment to expansion. And it's designed to reach new students. If you think of the other steps, mostly the first three digital approaches are improving the existing student experience. Digital expansion is reaching that new group that couldn't come to university for whatever reason. And you can see the growth here has been tremendous. We've reached over 140,000 students now enrolled in these combined campus and online programs. I'm going to pause here and ask if you have any questions or comments about any of those approaches. This will be the first time some of you have seen this. Some of you have also heard me talk about it or seen a video that I produced last year about this. So any questions about the 4Es framework?
Dale, let me just jump in here and ask, I think perhaps what might be of interest to a lot of institutions is this a linear approach, or can you have institution jumping from one to the other? If you could kindly comment on that, that might be of interest, especially to those who are thinking through this process.
It is nonlinear. It's all of the above. And you may find yourself doing a little bit of each. And at ASU, we are doing each of those different digital approaches. In the conversation that we're going to have today, I wanted to give you context so that you can start to focus your efforts. If you are trying to do all of the above, you may be overwhelmed. As you think about your particular needs going forward, is there a focus around a particular approach that you need to have? And does this language help you explain that focus to your colleagues? I think that the hardest conversation is the one around how do you explain what you're doing to colleagues who aren't working with digital resources? This is the natural progression for us. So all of the above could be the appropriate answer. I want to ask you now to describe your institution's efforts. Is there an area that's focus here? What do you think your institutional focus should be? And this may be a longer conversation within your university. Obviously, you don't need to make a decision today, but as a first take on your work, what is it that you think is going to be the most beneficial for your university? As I mentioned, some of these conversations we've had already with USIU, with American University of Beirut. These are, I think, the real cornerstones of the future of your university and the foundation of success. If you have a way to describe what you're doing, you're more likely to be successful in explaining it to your leadership and to your peers as you think about that, your goals in this. So I'll give you a few moments to do this. Don't worry about this being final or definitive. It's just an open discussion, really. And it'll help us as we think about what's the next workshop and what's the next level of detail that we can work with you on. These areas that you're defining now will give us direction. We are all constantly trying to adapt to your needs. We know this is a very diverse group and the needs are full spectrum. But with the conversations that we're having, we're getting deeper and deeper into these kinds of operational questions. So we want to give you a chance to tell us, well, this is where the most important conversation is right now at our university. Good. So Rwanda's working with all of them. That's important. And for some of the bigger universities like University of Rwanda, this is probably going to be the case. You're actually quite diverse internally. So you're going to have a vast array of resources. Okay, aims, enrichment, and enhancement. Just go ahead and work on that as we continue the conversation. We have 90 minutes today, so it's a long session, but I wanted to give you a chance to contribute along the way, think a little bit about these things and make your institution clear to us so that we can then help you as you get more and more detailed. So now I'm going to shift a little bit. While you're working on that in parallel, oh, sorry, go ahead, Jane. Do you have a question?
No, I just wanted to ask, were we limiting it to the four mentioned, or we could add, because I wanted to add inclusive.
Great, go ahead. That's a great idea. So why don't we add another category, and then Jane, if you would define that in that Google Doc, that way we can use that as a future discussion point as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good idea. So this is a constantly evolving framework. There's no definitive answer here. You've probably heard all of the terminology over the last 5 years. We have terms like blended learning, hybrid learning, high flex learning, online, all the other various descriptors that people have used. And what I was trying to do is to try to give you a more coherent set of descriptive words. So thank you, Jane, for adding another. While you're doing that, I want to continue talking about the structural supports that we're trying to build around this program. The e-learning design framework is another work in progress that we've been building to enable you to organize the many, many diverse and difficult conversations that you're having within your universities. So this process is also evolved, but I'll talk about it today to give you context for it. And then as you look at this, you'll be able to give us feedback also and critique the different ideas. So the framework starts with leadership and culture. This is really going to be a major challenge for every university in the world, not just Arizona State or the partner universities here for the e-learning initiative. Every organization now is working on the transformation of their culture to provide support for digital learning. And that's going to require also operational design, financial management. You're going to have to think about how do we support and sustain these efforts. This is a conversation that has come up with almost every consulting engagement that we've had. The course creation process, we've talked about this already quite a bit, so you have some context for that. Student services is a relatively new area, but it has started to come into the conversations about online learning and the digital expansion process. So thinking about how do we deliver our online students the services they need to be successful. Educational technology has been fundamental to all of our conversations so far. We've talked with many of you about LMS and other resources that you're building as part of your capacity locally. And then finally, faculty development, which is possibly the most important part. And the MasterCard Foundation e-learning initiative started with faculty development around the champions and has continued to emphasize that throughout. So as you build in your organizational faculty development initiative, we are now working on enabling you to use the resources such as the masterclass, which many of you participated in, and Quality Matters, which you've been hearing about for some time as part of this program, to develop your local faculty development. All of these are really designed to help you localize your process. So as you think about each of these areas, there are subtopics that are critical. Things like in operational design, what is the policy environment in your country? We've heard that in some countries, the fully online digital expansion model is not legal. You have to have the students come to campus to take the exams for academic integrity. So that particular country has created an environment where you're going to have to think more about a program like digital enhancement or digital extension that is developed within that policy framework. In other countries, you have more liberty to do fully online. So that's the first part. And then you can see there are many others. As you read these lists, things like governance, mission statement, objectives, all the way over to the student services area where you're talking about processes for student services, marketing, recruiting, admissions. That's a lot to take in. So I don't want you to worry about trying to understand all of this, because what we've done is we've started to reorient that, or I should say, organize it around different levels of capabilities. We're going to work with you to, as part of this process, to define where are you in the 3S capabilities ladder. Are you starting up? Are you scaling? Are you sustaining? For some of the partners, you've been doing online learning for years, so you have your digital expansion strategy in place, and you're growing your enrollment, and you would be a sustaining university. For others, you're just getting started with your LMS and your other infrastructure that you need to support the students. So it's not a competition. It is really a collaboration between all of the parties involved in the e-learning initiative to try to ensure that at the end of this process, all of us are in a sustaining mode. It doesn't matter where you start, it's really about how we all finish together at that high level. Now, I put together a doc. It is quite complex and maybe overwhelming initially, but hopefully eventually will become part of your conversation with your colleagues. So let me go through an example of one of these. I'm going to jump in to leadership and culture. You'll see all of them are here listed and linked. Each of the major categories in that honeycomb model is linked here. So if I go into leadership and culture and show you that as an example, here are some key questions that you can ask yourself and your colleagues as part of this conversation. Now, this list is going to continuously evolve. So we put the term draft in front of the descriptive phrase because eventually you will develop your own subset of these questions that are critical for your conversation. Well, we wanted to create a large resource base So you'll see there are hundreds of questions in this process. And we are in the process of organizing them and trying to structure them so that they can support you when you're having a conversation with your chief information officer, chief technology officer, your chief academic officer, your dean or department chair or faculty member or your colleague. All of those interested and involved participants in this process are going to have questions that you can anticipate using this document. So we want to encourage you to think about, at least to read through the questions. You don't have to answer them, but you should start to formulate your ideas for these. And some of these are rather sophisticated, like operational design. There's a lot going on here. The strategic direction, the environment, all of the design of the different components. So don't be intimidated. Be curious. We want you to be inquisitive now, and start to think about whether you can utilize some or all of these questions as part of your conversation. I think about this as kind of a cheat sheet for the issues that you will likely encounter during this process. And if we can help you anticipate those challenges and overcome them effectively and efficiently, then we're doing our job. So go ahead and explore that as you have more time. I'm going to keep moving just so we are able to stay on track and leave you some time to do some of this work a little bit later in the meeting. The way I think about this is we're putting together these two major frameworks, the e-learning approach and the program design. If you have clarity on your e-learning approach, it makes the program design conversation much more productive. And I'll give you an example of the ASU discussion in a moment, and how we found our e-learning approach, digital expansion, in 2009, and we embraced that, and it clarified many of the complexities of building the successful ASU online environment. So think about these things as integrated in the conversation. As an example, I did a couple of these just so you'd have some context. If you're doing digital enhancement or digital enrichment, then you don't need to worry about student services online, because those students are already on campus. So you have the students in your support network, and you don't need to build an entirely new operation. As you start to grow your level of complexity and you take on more and more digital extension, digital expansion types of roles, then you have to start thinking about things like student services, because students won't be coming to the university, and they will need access to things like the registrar's office or the bursar's office for payments, the library, other types of resources that are involved, career services, things that they would want and expect if they were on campus. So taking your own case, thinking a little bit more deeply about what are we trying to accomplish with our students and what do we need to use within this framework. If you can eliminate one or more of these honeycombs, then it simplifies your life. My perspective is you're going to always need course creation, educational technology, and faculty development, because those are fundamental to any of these. The others, the operational design, financial management, student services, are really dependent upon what you want to do with your digital resources. So I'm going to pause there. That's a lot, I know, to absorb in a short period of time, but I wanted to give you the context to get started. We think of this as the first conversation But now we can have more and more deep and productive conversations as we go. So let me stop for a moment and ask, does anyone have any questions about that digital framework? Does that make sense to people? Is it helpful? I think that's always our question when we're trying to think about and anticipate your needs. We're asking ourselves, will this be helpful? Philip or Kafui, did you have a question, or Eliud, did you have a comment?
No, I just did have just a quick comment. I think as I think through what you've just said and reflecting on all of the conversation we had with some of the partner institutions, I think there's also the tension between pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID, and often than not, what route a university should, a partner should actually be able to follow. You've had a situation where they've been sort of fully online, and then they're now coming back, and then there's all this other tension that you have to deal with regulators and all. So I think this is really important in terms of sort of aligning and helping institutions think through that, especially how you do that. And one of the final comment, especially on the student support, what I did, and I think ASU has done quite a bit of that, and I've seen at a few other institutions who have sort of transition that into fully online. So you have clubs that are online, and you have services that are online, and all that makes the whole, whatever phase that you're in a way a lot more smoother. Just those are a couple of things that just came into my head as you were speaking, especially on the design framework.
And I'm glad you raised COVID as an issue, because we can't take anything for granted anymore. We used to have a different world where the conversation about online was isolated in a small group of people, and now it's become universal. So everyone has an opinion, and it becomes a community discussion as opposed to just a collegial discussion among a few experts. And as you think about that, the post-COVID especially, which digital approach would you embrace if we have another wave, another pandemic? Maybe you have a natural disaster. Perhaps there's an earthquake or a volcano or something that disrupts the civil society. So we're not just trying to reproduce something that is responsive to the pandemic. We're trying to make resilient organizations that can survive anything. And I think that's the reason why this is really mission critical now. Whereas before, people didn't take it seriously and didn't really invest. We hope that the leadership now feel the same way. And that's part of the reason why we wanted to introduce the e-learning initiative framework, so that you could say to your leaders, all these issues we have to deal with need to be structured on our campus in a way that makes us focused and productive. Otherwise, they'll come up randomly. This is something that happened at Arizona State over a period of 10 years. All of these questions have come up just out of need. When we run into a problem and then we have to solve that problem, so we have a new question to answer. So we're trying to give you a little bit of an anticipatory model that saves you from stumbling across those mistakes.
Adele, yeah. I had some interesting statistics. We had a symposium today about the e-learning readiness in Kenya. This was done by KNET, which is talking about the universities are about 99% are e-ready. And I think this probably could have been accelerated due to the COVID-19. So I think, as you clearly said, probably the universities right now are aware that there could be a pandemic, it could be another disaster, probably that will make them shut down. Now they're actually becoming more aware that e-learning or having these infrastructures ready would be the way to go. The other thing I also got is that the ownership of actually devices actually also gone up in universities right now. And it's ranging all the way from about 40% to 87%. So I think that's a good
Great.
sign. Yeah, yeah.
So Philip, if you don't mind, if I could ask you to do a little bit of homework, can you find out if you can get a copy of the evaluation instrument that KNET used to determine that the institutions were 99% ready? This document, this framework, is actually a synthesis of a number of different evaluation tools. And we put together the list of questions based on the different tools that we encountered. So if you could get a copy of their tool, maybe it's a survey instrument, maybe it was a series of questions that they posed to leaders at the universities, that would be helpful for us, because we're always interested in making sure that the instrument, the framework, can help a university determine their readiness.
Sure. Yeah, I'll try and get in touch with them. And try and get the tool. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. I'll share with you.
So the last piece of the puzzle that I'm going to talk about, and then we'll let you do a little bit of work in your teams, is what did ASU finally decide to do, and how did we get to the level of development that we have today? I think it's oftentimes intimidating when you see an organization that is fully developed. You have a hard time connecting the starting point with the end point. So I want to do a little bit of that today so that you're not intimidated by this process. You can be successful with a digital expansion strategy if that is what the university wants to do. I don't want to imply that that is the only option. That's why we put the other options in the framework. Now, what ASU did is it said, we as a cultural, economic, social, public university want to reach 140,000 degree-seeking students. We did not have money to build new classroom buildings. Our government cut our funding by 50% in 2008. So we had to look at creative ways to reach more students at lower cost. And that set off the exploration that I'm going to talk about in terms of the digital expansion strategy. There are many, many decisions along the way that are embedded in the e-learning framework. And what we really are looking at is, how did we go from 2008, when the state government cut our funding 50%, through the success story that we celebrate today with 65,000 students online. In the near future, over 50% of our total enrollment will be online. And that's a huge transformation in our culture, in our support services, in our technology. But you can see how it took that long. Now we're looking at 13 years, from 600 students in 2009 to 60,000 students today. So we don't want you to think, oh, I have to get to 60,000 students. That's not the goal for you. You may have a different model, a different approach, and a different goal. And that's what we want to talk about today. So the design principles that guided the ASU expansion model included the integration of the online and campus courses in a way that would ensure academic integrity. So we have the same faculty, the same curriculum, the same assessment. All of those academic elements are the same. There is another strategy for this, which is to build a separate academic unit and to use that academic unit for all online programs. We've seen that in other universities. There's a famous case, the Purdue University in the United States purchased an online university and it maintains a separate entity. They gave it a new brand. They call it Purdue Global, but it is a separate academic unit. So there are different strategies here. We embraced the single academic strategy. We also said that there are online students and on-campus students, and they don't mix. So if a student says, I want to be an online student, then they are completely online. We will never require them to take an on-campus class. And the same is true for a campus student. If they say they want to be on campus, we will use techniques like enrichment and enhancement, but we won't require them to take a fully online course. When we talk about digital expansion, we have an asynchronous model. So there are two options here, at least two, synchronous and asynchronous. I mentioned earlier how USIU Africa uses a synchronous model, and they broadcast the lessons to their online students. We use the asynchronous model exclusively because we have students all over the world. So time zones cause problems. You can't align all of the times that all of the students have in one particular moment. So we always have this as our fundamental principle. And then finally, all of our student services are fully online. We can never require a student to come to campus to complete an administrative or academic transaction. That means we have, through the past 13 years, built all of the things, as Elliot was describing, even clubs and fraternities and social activities online to support our students. So these are major principles, and these evolved over time. These were not in place at the start of the process. In fact, the reason why we have principles like these is because we failed in previous attempts to launch a successful digital expansion strategy, and we learned. So you're going to fail. I'm certain that at some point you'll be thinking, we didn't do this right. We need to do it again in a better way. That's the normal process, and we evolved towards these principles. We also had to evolve organizationally, and this is where you have, as Focals, you have to navigate the complexities of your local culture and organizational dynamics. We ended up developing Ed Plus, which is a central enterprise unit that supports all of the academic units. So our Department of Math, our Department of Chemistry, our Department of Biology, they all rely on Ed Plus to help them launch their degree programs online. Again, there are alternatives. There are decentralized models where the organization has support services in the Department of Math, in the Department of Chemistry, in the other departments. We felt that in order to be fair to all departments, big and small, we wanted to use a central support unit. Small units don't have the money to hire staff and maintain their own team. Big units will probably do that because they have extra resources, because they're large, they have large enrollment and a lot of faculty. So we've come up with a way to provide a foundational support for all units that want to go online, and we have over 300 degree programs now fully online. And then if there are units that want to increase their local support, they can do that with their own money. So we think about this as the basic question, who's responsible for doing what? When you're looking at this e-learning framework, we want you to think about it as a series of questions that will help you answer this major question. Who is responsible for doing what? If we look at a sample of these, there are many different types of services, things like governance, new program research, academic program launch, marketing, enrollment management, admission decision, that someone has to do. So we have at the provost office institutional leadership that provides governance for our digital expansion. And the new program research, Ed Plus does that. For academic program launch, it's a combination of academic unit and Ed Plus. For marketing, Ed Plus takes the lead. We also outsource some of our marketing because we did not know how to do digital marketing. This is not a strength of Arizona State University when we started. Over the last 13 years, we've learned how to do that. And now in 2023, we're going to eliminate our outsource partner, and we're going to do all of our own marketing for all of our academic units. Enrollment management, I'll talk more about that in a moment. That's why it's bold, is an Ed Plus responsibility. And admissions is the academic unit. They control the academic enterprise. So they decide which students are qualified to enroll in the online program or the campus program. As you think about your organization, you should start building these kinds of operational matrices. For every element in the framework, you should be able to answer the question, who is going to do that? And if your leadership tells you you need fully online degree program, you need a master's in business administration online, then you should have this framework in your mind. In order to successfully do that, we have to fill in all of these blanks. So it's a long-term process that you will be working on with your colleagues. And for many of you, it'll be a life's work. That's the way it is for us. When you start this process, it becomes the identity within the institution for that individual. Bill Regier, some of you have met. He is the CEO of ASU Online and the university dean. He has been there since 2009. So for him, this is the life's work. Now, I want to drill down very briefly into enrollment management as an example, because this is where we needed a totally new process. If you think about how do you successfully enroll a student, it starts for us with a request for information. The student has to identify themselves as interested in going to ASU Online. And then they become a prospect, an applicant, an admitted student, and finally enrolled student. Once they enroll, they've paid for the tuition and they become an enrolled student who has other services and resources. All of this required us to build a technical infrastructure. Now, this is too complex for most of us to read, but it includes, you can see things like Amazon Web Services for hosting, Google Analytics, all of these areas that are customer relationship management systems, Salesforce, we use data warehousing, we use Tableau to help us do reports. All of these things are critical to support this complex process. On the other side, in the enrolled student area, you'll notice we have a number of application programming interfaces. Canvas is our LMS, so that becomes one of the cornerstones of our approach there. And all of the other areas, you can see learning analytics and data warehousing, all those things are part of that same ecosystem. So you should, again, not be intimidated, but be inquisitive. We've already worked with a number of you to explain these elements and to explore opportunities locally. You may not have access to Amazon Web Services or Salesforce for customer relationship management, but there may be other products that you have access to in your market that can be just as successful. So for us, this whole process is about the student. The only reason we're doing any of this is to reach more students, as I said at the beginning. So we have the pipeline, or what people call the funnel, and you'll notice here, it starts with a really big number. 47,757 people said they were interested in ASU Online, but only 1,648 converted to prospect. So you'll see that our conversion rate is only 1.76% at the end of this funnel. This is one example from many, many cases that we've studied. And this means that we need people on our team who are focused on increasing the conversion rate of students at each level. We want more than 1.76% of these students to become enrolled at ASU. We spend a lot of money and a lot of time understanding this process and building these kinds of tools. Again, this may be something that you don't have experience with. When we started, we knew nothing about this. For the first 5 years, we outsourced this process entirely to an OPM, an online partnership manager. And that was necessary because we couldn't even begin to understand what the marketing and the funnel management meant. Today, we built the expertise. After that 5 years of watching and learning, we became experts, and now we have our own teams to do this. So as you think about your organization, you need to think about the normal things like the financial management, academic services, operations. But at the end of the digital expansion process, we had to add in an entirely new group of units. Things like recruitment call center operations, internet marketing, retention call center operations. Today, there are hundreds of people at ASU Online who work in these areas. This is something we had no expertise in 13 years ago. So for you, as you're building your operations, you should have in your head some form of organization that can scale and sustain your operational model. I want to go all the way back now to the starting point and say, if you can focus on a specific digital approach, digital enrichment, enhancement, extension, expansion, then this will guide you in the conversations that you have with your leaders. They're looking to you for leadership in this area now. They're looking to you as an expert, and we want to be able to support you to give you the right informational resources so that you can make good decisions and you can ask good questions when you don't know. So I want to pause here and ask again, what questions do you have about this process that I might be able to answer at this time? That was one case study, just to give you a context. Are any of you involved in that level of detail now in your organization, building a new operation within the university? And I know, Christian, you're the new hire at Earth with responsibility for this. So as you think about your context, you have a unique university with a unique mission that's trying to find a way to integrate the digital resources. I think it's going to be an exciting opportunity to define that structure.
It works. In fact, we are so excited about to expand the program here in Earth University. So
great. So now you have a little bit of context for what that might take, and we want everyone to be realistic. Sometimes there's a fantasy that exists in the leadership's mind that this is easy, and there's nothing easy about it. You all know that now. And COVID has made it painfully obvious that none of this is easy. So as you're having these conversations, we want you to be able to explain it very clearly. Here are the pieces of our organization that we have to build if we're going to do what you're saying as a leader. And that way you don't get confused and angry leaders who say, well, how come you haven't set this up? It's easy. No, it's not.
I think that's something that our leaders knows and they are very clear about it, because we are so small here in Earth University compared with you guys in the other universities. So that's something that for us, we are very aware about it, and we are trying, and for us it's very, very nice to have your example and your guidance about that, because we are trying to understand and learn about it to avoid the mistakes, and thank you so much for that. The other thing is we are trying to first have a kind of pilot here with the virtual programs and university. The other model is.
Hey, Christian, your audio is dropping out a little. If you want to turn off your video, there's a good example of the challenges we all face, right? If we want to do something like the digital extension and we have challenges with audio and video, it'll make our lives more complicated.
Exactly. That's the very good example.
Yeah.
But I was telling you that for us, it's very important to have a pilot and to have a first test here, because for Earth University, the virtual model is something that is very new for us. So this program, the whole project with MasterCard Foundation and the partners universities are very important for us, and it's very good because we are learning from you guys. So that's something very good.
We're glad to hear that.
For me, the whole program it's very new because our e-learning team just started like 3 months ago, and we are just enrollment in this new position. But we are learning a lot from you guys, and for me, it's very important to have the whole experience and know more about you. And definitely, we are going to have so much question when you are coming here and try to take advantage of the whole visit. Great.
Well, that's why we're offering this support. So any other comments, feel free to jump in. I wanted to keep moving here. We've got a little less than half an hour left, and we have organized the last 30 minutes to provide you with an opportunity to talk about this, to go into breakout rooms. We've set up the 4 different digital approaches in that document that you were working on previously. And we thought you could talk to each other for 15 minutes just to see if you have similar answers to these questions. So there are 2 major questions. Why is this approach the one that makes the most sense for your institution? And then what challenges do you face in implementing the approach? So there are 4 obviously in that, and let me go ahead and jump out again to show you this document, give you the guidelines before we put you into breakout rooms. So thinking about, I'll go down to the bottom here. Each one of these has their own category. So digital extension, digital expansion, and then the other 2 are up above. Digital enrichment, digital enhancement. So go ahead and join the breakout room that's of most interest to you, and we hope there will be more than 1 person in that space. If there's not, then come back and I'll join you in a conversation about what's most important for you. Why don't we go ahead and go to breakout now for 15 minutes. These are your choices. So you join the category that you want to talk about with your colleagues.